What if I told you that the wall didn't just stand against the cold, but against fate itself? That in another world, Ned Stark didn't just guard the north, he became its weapon. And it all started with one forbidden prayer whispered into the wind. Snow had been falling for days, thick and unrelenting, blanketing Castle Black in an icy silence that even the crows dared not break. The fire in Ned Stark's chest hadn't dimmed since the Raven came. Jon's letter, brief and desperate, spoke of White Walkers marching again, but this time they weren't just a rumor from beyond the woods. Villagers were gone. The Night's Watch had been cut down to a handful of survivors. And the wall. The wall was no longer enough. Ned read the letter 5 times before the cold air burned his fingers. He hadn't felt such dread since the Tower of Joy. His hand trembled, but not from the cold. He knew the wall was more than stone and ice. It was a symbol, and symbols could fail unless something ancient could awaken again. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he stood at the highest rampart of Winterfell, staring north, eyes fixed on the frozen line where the wall pierced the horizon like a jagged scar. His breath curled in the air like smoke rising to the gods. But these weren't the 7, not the gods of the Sept nor the southern nobles. Ned Stark's thoughts belonged to the weirwoods, the old gods of the north, silent and watchful, buried in the roots of trees older than history. He whispered his plea beneath the godswood of Winterfell. Beneath the bleeding eyes of the ancient heart tree, Ned knelt alone as snow gathered on his shoulders and in his hair. He asked not for victory, not for glory, but for strength. Strength to protect the realm, to hold the darkness back, to keep his children safe. And somewhere in the depths of the weirwood's roots something heard him. That night the ground shook. Not enough to destroy, but enough to wake. The black ravens screamed and fled. South of the wall, the icy winds howled louder than before, as if warning the world that something impossible had begun. The wall itself groaned. The Night's Watch watched in silence as ancient stone cracked, not from weakness but from within. Runes appeared, glowing faintly blue, spidering up the wall like veins of cold fire. And then the wall began to rise. Okay, pause. Did anyone else just feel that chill? Because what's happening now literally rewrites everything we know about Westeros. And trust me, this is just the beginning. No one believed the reports at first. When Sam sent ravens south, most thought it was just another exaggeration by frightened men. But when the wall rose another 50 feet in a single night, then 100, the realm started to pay attention. Ned Stark did not return to Winterfell. He marched north alone, riding through snow that swallowed his horse's legs, following the pull in his bones. There was something inside him, like the wind in the trees was whispering where to go. As he passed through the lands of always winter, strange things happened. Direwolves didn't run, they followed. The cold didn't bite him. It parted around him. By the time he reached the Shadow Fort, a long-forgotten watchtower buried under centuries of ice, Ned wasn't just a lord of Winterfell. He was something else. The ancient runes etched in the ice glowed when he passed. He pressed his hand to the black stone beneath the snow, and something beneath it stirred. A heartbeat. Not his. Wait, what? Did Ned Stark just awaken something inside the wall itself? Because this changes everything. You thought Dragonfire was ancient. Just wait. Back in King's Landing, Cersei laughed when the Raven came. Ned Stark has gone mad, she scoffed. Raising the wall with prayers? Let him freeze, but Tyrion didn't laugh. He remembered the tales old Meisters whispered after too much wine, the ones about the wall being more than a defense, that it was a seal, a lock, and that it had been sealed once before using blood. Far to the east, Bran stirred in his sleep, not as a crippled boy but as something more. The three-eyed raven, trapped between visions of time, saw it all. The wall rising, glowing, cracking. He whispered a name he hadn't spoken since he lost his legs. Father. And then Jon Snow stood alone at Castle Black, watching the impossible happen. The wall rose higher and higher, growing like a living thing until it touched the clouds. Storms raged around it. Lightning cracked against its sides. But Jon felt no fear. He felt awe. He knew the old gods had answered. But he also knew the price would come, because nothing in Westeros comes without a price. And when you ask the old gods for power, you don't get to choose how they answer. 3 days later, the wall stopped rising. But something had changed. The wind didn't just howl, it whispered. People started hearing voices near the base. Some claimed to see figures walking inside the wall, faces frozen behind the ice. One brother went mad, clawing at the stone, screaming, They're still alive! They're trapped! Before anyone could stop him, he slit his throat on the edge of a shard of ice. Here's where it gets crazy. What if the wall was never just to keep White Walkers out, but to keep something else in? As panic spread among the Night's Watch, Jon sent word to the north, but Ned had already vanished. He wasn't seen again for weeks. Whispers said he walked into the base of the wall and never came back. But then a storm of crows blackened the sky over Winterfell, and a figure emerged from the Godswood, taller, colder, and quieter than the Ned they remembered. He didn't speak much, but he commanded. People obeyed without question. Maesters noticed his eyes were different, not white, not warg-like, but shadowed with ancient storm. Even the direwolves kept their distance. Arya returned from Braavos weeks later and saw her father. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But she whispered to Sansa that something inside him was watching her through his skin. South of the Neck, the realm didn't care. Dorne ignored it. The Reach mocked it. The Iron Islands prepared for war, sensing the chaos rising. But north of the wall, the White Walkers weren't mocking. They were retreating. Something about the wall terrified even them. Bran, still lost in visions, saw glimpses of the first men carving runes with blood. He saw the children of the forest crying at the base of the wall as something was buried beneath it. Not killed, but chained. And now those chains were breaking. This next part is going to blow your mind. Remember when I said the wall was a lock? What if the raising of the wall didn't just strengthen it? It activated the prison beneath. Deep beneath the ice, Ned descended through staircases not made by men. His torch didn't burn with fire, but with flickering green light from weirwood bark soaked in sap. In the depths he saw them, bones of kings older than time, frozen faces staring forever forward. Whispers called him Warden, not Warden of the North, Warden of the Seal. He wasn't raising the wall to protect Westeros from the White Walkers. He was preparing Westeros for something worse. Okay, real talk. If you're still watching, you're about to find out what secret even the Night King feared. And what Ned Stark did that no one else would dare. But before that, hit that like if you just realized this isn't the Game of Thrones you thought you knew. And drop a comment. What do you think is trapped under the wall? We're just scratching the surface. Let's keep going. Scratching the surface. Let's keep going. Ned emerged from the tunnels beneath the wall with frost on his beard and silence in his steps. The men at Castle Black didn't recognize him. Not at first. His eyes weren't just cold. They were distant, like he'd seen something he couldn't explain and carried it with him. He didn't speak of what he found in the deep. Only that the wall needed more. Stronger runes, more blood, more power. Jon met him at the base of the wall. He stepped forward, half in disbelief. "Father?" he said, the word cracking like old bark in his throat. Ned looked at him, and for a moment, just a moment, he was himself. "Jon," he said, voice raw. "We're too late." The wall was never enough. But now, it's awake. Jon asked the question they both feared. "What did you wake up?" Ned didn't answer. He simply looked north, and then the ground rumbled again. Thousands of miles away in the citadel, the glass candles flared without warning, and every master felt a pain behind their eyes. In Old Town, ravens flew without being sent, circling in the sky like they'd lost all sense. Archmaester Marwyn, the one they called the Mage, read the ancient scrolls again. He found one line he hadn't noticed before. It wasn't written in ink, it was carved with a blade. When the warden breaks the frostbound seal, the first shadow will breathe again. He dropped the scroll and whispered, "The old gods never left. They were just waiting." Back at the wall, strange things began to happen. Animals wouldn't come near. Fire wouldn't burn properly near the black runes that now pulsed on the wall's base. One night, a watchman heard voices under the ice chanting in a language that made his ears bleed. And yet Ned Stark didn't flinch. He walked along the wall like a man carrying out a sentence he'd known for years. Each night he sat beneath the weirwood tree in the snow, whispering to it, bleeding into the roots. Every night the wall grew, not just taller but alive. The ice began to move like breath in the cold. Jon pleaded with him. "Tell me what you're doing." "Let me help." Ned looked at him. "This is older than us. Older than the wall, older than the Night King. The White Walkers weren't the end. They were the warning." "Okay, stop. Did he just say White Walkers were the warning? We've been fearing them since Season 1, and now they're just the prologue." Jon stepped back, his hand instinctively moving to Longclaw's hilt. "Then what are we facing?" Ned's answer was quiet. "The first thing that ever hated fire. That night, under a moon swallowed by clouds, the wind shifted. It no longer came from the north. It rose from the deep beneath the wall, and with it came ash. The ice cracked, not from heat, but from pressure inside. Something wanted out. Something that had waited since the Age of Heroes. Far beyond the wall, the White Walkers gathered, not to march, but to kneel, to bow before something rising from the frozen earth, a shadow with no face, only a crown of jagged black antlers. It moved without form, feeding on cold, bending winter itself around it. The Night King watched from afar and fell to his knees. Yeah, let that sink in. The Night King kneeled. Back at Winterfell, Bran woke from his trance with blood on his lips. His eyes were pure white, and he began to speak in a voice not his own. "The blood that sealed the wall has thinned. The heart has awakened. The wall is no longer a prison. It is a throne." Arya, standing nearby, moved her hand to needle. "Whose throne?" she asked. Bran turned slowly. "Whoever controls it." In that moment, the game changed. Westeros wasn't fighting to survive winter anymore. It was fighting to control it. Ned Stark returned to Winterfell with an army behind him. Not of men, not of whites, but of the bound. Spirits frozen in time, held in the wall for millennia, now sworn to him. They walked like men, spoke like whispers, and bled nothing. Jon watched his father command them and felt his stomach twist. "What did you give them in return?" he asked. Ned stared into the fire. "Everything I didn't want to lose." Boom, did he just sacrifice something to gain that army? What did he give up? Rumors spread fast. That Ned had traded his soul. That the old gods had made him their vessel. That the wall had chosen a king. South, the realm broke into chaos. Daenerys, still holding Dragonstone, sent ravens demanding answers. Her dragons circled, uneasy. One began to refuse to fly near the north. "It smells of death," she said. Tyrion, watching her, said only, "The Starks were never just wolves. They were always something deeper." Sansa ruled Winterfell in Ned's absence, growing colder by the day. Her letters became shorter. Her counsel darker. She wore furs dyed red, not for warmth, but for remembrance. Arya watched her with suspicion. "You're changing," she said. Sansa replied, "No, I'm finally seeing." And far north, beyond even the maps, something else was stirring. The last of the children of the forest felt it. They sang one final song into the roots of the trees, then disappeared. Back at the wall, Jon made his choice. He summoned the Night's Watch remnants, swore new vows, and rode alone to meet the shadow rising from the ice. He found it waiting, and behind it his father, Jon, dismounted. "What are you becoming?" he asked. Ned replied, "What I must be." The shadow moved closer. It didn't speak, but Jon heard it anyway in his bones. It offered him power, bloodline, memory, the truth of his name, and what came before. Jon said no. And for the first time the shadow recoiled. It had been refused. Ned looked at his son with sadness. "You are fire, Jon. You'll never understand the cold. But I can't stop it anymore. I can only ride it." "Then I'll stop you," Jon said. Ned didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice. He simply turned to the wall, and it answered. It cracked, opened, and out of it came the first storm. Black snow, frozen lightning. And behind it, a shape, older than winter. Jon turned and fled, heart pounding. Not out of fear, but because he finally believed. The wall had never been built to hold back the dead. It had been built to bury the living. Jon didn't sleep for 3 days after he returned to Castle Black. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. That shape behind the wall, the storm that followed it, the look in Ned Stark's eyes, if they were still even his. There was no peace in the north anymore. Only a rising tide of power that no blade could kill, no fire could melt, and no oath could bind. The brothers of the Night's Watch huddled in silence. There were only 43 left, and half of them were boys. They didn't speak much, and when they did, it was always in whispers. The wall had begun to hum. Not loudly, not enough to rattle bones, but just enough to crawl under the skin like a heartbeat beneath ice. Jon stood atop the wall, hand gripping Longclaw so tightly his knuckles burned white. In the distance, where the sky met the earth, he saw the ice move. Not just collapse or break, but shift like something beneath it was crawling toward freedom. And Jon knew. The real war had begun. Far to the south, Daenerys stood on the cliffs of Dragonstone, her dragons roaring restlessly. Rhaegal refused to eat. Drogon kept flying toward the north, circling back only when her voice screamed loud enough to pierce the wind. She clenched her fists as she read the raven's message for the third time. The wall rises still. The dead bow to the living, but the living no longer bleed. She turned to Tyrion, who watched her from a distance. "The North has become something else," she said. Tyrion nodded. "And if Ned Stark commands the wall, then we may be looking at a new kind of king." She turned to him slowly. "Then he'll need a queen." "Wait, what? Is Daenerys actually planning to ally with Ned Stark? Or does she have something far more dangerous in mind?" The lords of Westeros were already choosing sides. In the Vale, Jon Royce sent no men. "We don't march toward ghosts," he said. "We wait," but others didn't. Tormund Giantsbane led a wildling horde south of the wall, swearing loyalty not to Jon but to the old ways. "The ice has always belonged to the gods," he roared. "Let the north bleed or bend." Arya watched from Winterfell's walls, as the sky turned a shade of grey even she had never seen. "This isn't winter," she said to Gendry. "It's something worse. In the Godswood, Bran saw visions that bent time. The wall wasn't built by Bran the Builder alone. It was built on the bones of giants, with blood from children of the forest and whispers from something older. And Ned, this Ned, had unlocked that foundation." Bran's eyes rolled white. He whispered, "The wall was never meant to hold. It was meant to choose." Below, Sansa gathered her bannermen. "We don't answer to kings who speak with ghosts," she told them. "Not even if they wear my father's face." But the North didn't listen with ears. It listened with roots. And the trees had already chosen. Deep beneath the wall, in the halls now echoing with whispers, Ned Stark stood before the throne of frost, an altar of ice covered in sigils long forgotten. His hand hovered above it, blood trailing from his palm like it had been cut not by blade but by will. He heard them, the bound ones. Not undead, not alive. Men whose names were erased by time, sacrificed to keep the first darkness sealed. Now they called him king beneath the frost. He didn't ask for it. He didn't want it. But the moment he offered his name to the wall, the crown formed, not metal, but black shards of frozen bone piercing through his brow like antlers. The wall no longer guarded Westeros. It ruled it, okay, pause, can you even imagine? The wall, once just a boundary, is now a living, breathing, thinking power. And Ned Stark is no longer just a man. He's the heart of it. Jon gathered his most loyal brothers. Sam returned from the citadel, scrolls in hand, face pale. "There's something older than the others. Older than men. The Maesters tried to burn the records. I found only one word." "What word?" Jon asked. Sam looked up. "Thurrock." The room fell silent. "What is it?" "Not what," Sam said. "When it was the first winter, before the long night, before names, and it was waking south of the wall, wildlings began to vanish. Not dead, just gone. Trees froze solid in seconds. Lakes cracked open and never closed. The snow turned grey, and from the center of it came whispers that drove men mad, and still Ned stood at the heart of it, silent, watching, listening. Arya rode alone through the snow to find him. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't tell anyone. She carried needle and faces. But when she found him, standing atop a frozen hill with the wall behind him like a god's spine, she dropped all of it. "Father?" He turned. For a heartbeat, he was just her father. Then his eyes darkened. "You should not be here," he said. "Then tell me what's coming." He didn't lie. "Not now." "I didn't raise the wall," he said. "I answered it." Arya's breath froze mid-air. "Then what did it ask?" "To be remembered," he said, and from the trees the wind spoke her name. Not Arya, not no one. Her real name, the one the gods whispered to the stars the night she was born. And in that moment, Arya Stark understood. The gods didn't choose heroes. They chose sacrifices. Back at Winterfell, Bran's visions took him beyond the wall, beneath it, into a place without time, where shadows were older than language, and in that blackness he saw it, a throne of frost with a beating heart beneath it. And Ned not sitting on it, but fused with it, his soul holding the seal shut by will alone, and it was cracking. Back on Dragonstone, Daenerys made her move. She mounted Drogon and flew north alone. Tyrion begged her to wait. She didn't. "I have fire," she said. "If the wall has chosen a king, I'll burn the throne before I bend to it." And so the dragon came to the wall. But the wall didn't melt. It screamed. 1,000 frozen faces opened their mouths in unison. Not in pain. In rage, Drogon reeled. Fire met frost. The sky turned black. And from the top of the wall, Ned Stark raised one hand. The fire died. Wait, hold on. Ned just put out dragonfire with a hand gesture. Daenerys hovered in the air, shocked. And then the wall fought back. Spears of ice launched into the sky. One grazed Drogon's wing. Another missed her head by inches. She pulled back, heart pounding. But as she flew away, she saw it. Ned Stark standing in the wind, not flinching. Not commanding being. The wall was no longer a weapon. It was a god. Hand it had chosen him. Back at Castle Black, Jon knew what had to be done. We can't fight the wall, he said. But we can stop what's beneath it. Whatever Thurek is, it's using Father. And it'll kill him if we don't act. Sam nodded. We go beneath. We find the source, and we seal it again. You sure? Tormund growled. You sure we ain't just marching into our deaths? Jon looked north. No, but I'm sure we're already dead if we don't. And so the party formed, Jon. Sam, Arya, Tormund, Ghost, and the last true believers of the Watch. They carried fire, dragonglass, and blood, because the wall was no longer a defense. It was a door, and now someone had left it open. Open. The wind screamed louder the deeper they went. Jon's torch flickered, as if gasping for air, casting long shadows that danced across the frost-covered walls. The descent beneath the wall wasn't marked on any map. There were no stairs, only a slope carved by ancient forces, spiraling down in a frozen corkscrew that felt more like a throat than a passage. Every step took them closer to something that had waited, not for centuries, but for the right invitation. Arya walked just behind Jon, silent, watching his back and everything else. She didn't trust the walls. Sometimes they seemed to move as though alive. Tormund muttered curses in the old tongue, while Sam clutched a book made from flayed bark and sealed in human skin. He hadn't spoken since the fourth torch went out. They walked in silence. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became, until even Ghost growled low, tail-tucked, fur bristling, and then the humming started. Low, vibrating. Not in the ears, but in the teeth. A pulse beneath their boots that echoed in their skulls. It wasn't a sound. It was a presence. A breath. Jon stopped. It's awake. Sam looked pale. This isn't just magic. This is memory. It remembers everything. Every death. Every lie. Arya narrowed her eyes. Good. Let it remember what a Stark looks like before it bleeds. Wait, hold up. Did you feel that line? Arya isn't just here for truth. She's here for vengeance. But for who? Above them at the wall's crown, Ned Stark stood like a statue. He hadn't moved in hours. Snow coated his shoulders. Ice crusted over his beard. But his eyes pulsed faint blue with every breath the wall took. Behind him, the bound ones formed a circle. They didn't speak. They knelt to him. To the throne that wasn't made, but grown from the bones of forgotten kings. Ned Stark had become more than the Warden of the North. He was its memory. And memory was about to take form. Back in Winterfell, Bran gasped. His eyes rolled white, then snapped back. "Sansa!" he shouted. She came running. "There's no time," Bran said. "They've passed the third vein." Sansa blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means the wall is no longer just holding power. It's channeling it downward, to whatever's buried beneath. And Jon?" she asked. Bran didn't answer. Back beneath the wall, the path ended in a chamber so vast it swallowed the torchlight. The walls were smooth, too smooth. Not carved, formed, grown like roots. At the center was a massive structure. It looked like a heart suspended in ice. Black veins pulsed through it. Around it, 12 frozen figures stood in a perfect circle, their faces hidden beneath frost. Jon stepped forward. "Is this it?" Sam's hands trembled as he opened the book. "The first winter." It wasn't a season. It was a being. A consciousness that hated flame, life, warmth. The children of the forest didn't just build the wall, they buried it. Here, Arya scanned the statues. "Then why is it still breathing?" Sam answered without looking up. "Because someone opened the lock." "Your father," Tormund spat. "So what do we do?" "Fight it?" Jon looked at the pulsing heart. "No, we talk to it. Oh my God, Jon's actually going to speak to a forgotten force that nearly ended the world once already." He stepped closer. "I am Jon Snow, son of Rhaegar Targaryen, blood of ice and fire. I seek no crown, no throne, only peace. The heart beat faster. I offer you something else, Jon said, drawing his blade and slicing his palm. Memory. Blood hit the ice and everything changed. The chamber shook. The statues cracked. The black veins pulsed like arteries. One of the frozen figures turned its head and looked directly at Arya. Her breath caught. No. It was Lyanna Stark, frozen, silent, eyes wide open. Arya backed up. That's not possible, Sam whispered. They sealed their own blood to build the lock. The first winter needed a sacrifice of name and power. Lyanna wasn't buried at Winterfell. She was buried here. Jon staggered back. No, I saw her tomb. I saw her statue. Sam shook his head. That was for the realm, not for the wall. Suddenly, all 12 statues blinked in unison, and the voice came, not aloud, but inside their minds. Cold, male, female, timeless, you unsealed the vow. Who shall we take? Arya shouted, No one's here to offer anything. We came to seal it again. Then give us a Stark. The chamber went still. Jon stepped forward. Take me. But the voice answered, You are already marked by fire. Then Arya, I'll do it. Tormund grabbed her. No, girl. Arya's eyes locked with the heart. I took many faces. It's time I gave one back. Jon screamed, No! But it was too late. Arya ran her blade across her cheek. Blood hit the frost. The heart stopped beating, and in that silence the 12 figures shattered, but not into ice, into roots. The black veins retreated, slithering back into the wall, sealing it once again. The chamber groaned, the air warmed by a fraction of a degree, and a voice, ancient and tired, whispered, Debt paid. Arya fell. Jon caught her. Her eyes were open. She smiled. I remember now, she whispered. I was always meant to end the war. Then she closed her eyes and breathed. Arya Stark just saved the entire realm, but at what cost? Above them the wall groaned again, but this time it lowered. Inch by inch, the bound ones faded. The storm above began to clear. Ned Stark, still standing at the summit, exhaled. He looked south and whispered, It's done. And then he collapsed. Bran saw it all. He felt the balance shift. He's free, he told Sansa, but not gone. Daenerys, watching from Dragonstone, lowered her eyes. A king who gave his crown to bury a god. Jon carried Arya's body back up the passage in silence. Ghost walked beside him. No words, no tears. Just purpose. When they reached the top, the wall stood as it always had, but something inside it was quiet now, sleeping. Not defeated, just waiting. Jon looked to the sky. If it wakes again, he said softly, you'll have to deal with me next. And the wind did not answer, but somewhere deep beneath the frost it listened. The news of Arya Stark's sacrifice spread across Westeros like wildfire through dry grass. But it didn't spread by raven. It spread by dream. Men and women woke in the middle of the night, gasping, hands trembling, remembering her face. They didn't know her name, most of them. But they knew the sound of her final breath, knew what it meant to offer yourself to silence so others could speak freely again. The old gods didn't send messages, they sent memories. And now Arya Stark belonged to all of them. At Winterfell, Sansa stood beneath the heart tree, her fingers brushing the rough bark. She didn't cry. She didn't break. She simply whispered. She always knew how it would end. Bran sat in his chair nearby, his eyes closed, silent. When he opened them again, they were darker than before. She's not gone, he said. She's become what the wall once was. Sansa frowned. What do you mean? She's the seal now. The sacrifice. The blade buried in the ice. Wait, hold up. So Arya didn't just die. She became the lock. That's some ancient magic level stuff right there. Down in King's Landing, Queen Cersei stood on her balcony listening to the wind. It hadn't snowed in weeks, but now the air carried a chill no fire could fight. She watched as a raven landed nearby, its eyes white as bone. It didn't caw. It just stared, waiting. Behind her, Qyburn approached carefully. There's movement in the north again. But not war. Not yet, Cersei turned. Not yet? Something's shifted, he said. A great silence, heavy enough to crush gods. And those who follow it are changing, and he was right. Across the north, people began to behave differently. They prayed more. Not to the seven, but to trees. They hung offerings from the branches. Blooded cloth antlers, carved faces. and when the wind blew through the weirwoods it sounded like whispering wolves. Jon returned to Winterfell a hero. But he didn't celebrate. He stood over Arya's empty grave. She had no body. Only her sword remained, frozen into the black ice beneath the wall. He buried it himself. No songs, no speech. Just snow. Sam tried to speak to him, but Jon stayed silent for days. When he finally did talk, it was only this. It wasn't the White Walkers. That was never the true war. We fought the first breath of winter, and we won, but just barely. Daenerys arrived 1 week later. She came alone. No dragons, no army. Just her and snow in her silver braid. Jon met her in the Godswood. She stared at him for a long time. "I saw the wall," she said. "What it became. What it held." Jon nodded. "And I don't want the Iron Throne," she said. "Not anymore. What good is a chair when the earth itself can rise and swallow us all?" Jon blinked. "Then why are you here?" "To ask you something." He tilted his head. "Will the wall wake again?" That question hit hard. And here's where the script gets serious. Because even though the threat is buried, sealed, locked, there's always someone foolish enough to knock, and that someone was already on their way. Deep in the Iron Islands, Euron Greyjoy stood at the bow of his ship, listening to a horn none of his men could hear. He'd found something in Valyria, an obsidian blade wrapped in chains of seaweed and bone, and when he held it he saw visions, not of the drowned god, but of the thing beneath the wall. He smiled. "The sea will take it," he whispered. He didn't want to rule Westeros. He wanted to drown it. Jon gathered a council, the first of its kind. Tyrion came from Dragonstone, Brienne from the Stormlands, Davos from White Harbor, Tormund from the True North. Sam, of course, stood beside Jon and Ned Stark, yes, Ned Stark, but not as flesh, not as ice. As voice he spoke through the weirwood, just once, but it was enough. "There are those who will try to use the seal," the voice said, "to awaken it, to bind it. The old gods do not forgive those who seek power from the grave." And then silence. The council knew what it meant. This wasn't peace, this was pause, the fragile, terrifying breath before the scream. Tyrion raised his goblet. "To Arya Stark, who taught the gods to bleed." They drank and prepared because the wall was quiet but the sea was not, and Euron was already on his way. The sound of Euron Greyjoy's war horn echoed across the waves like a monster's scream. It wasn't the call of battle, it was a summons. Something ancient, something hungry. The blade he carried pulsed with a sick, wet heat. It wasn't made by men. It wasn't meant for ships or war. It was meant for sacrifice. His men didn't question it. They were too far gone. Saltwater madness had taken them. Every time they sailed closer to the north, their skin cracked, their lips bled, but they laughed, as if the pain was part of the promise. Euron stared north and whispered, "We're not sailing to Winterfell. We're sailing to her tomb." Meanwhile, Winterfell had never felt colder. Snow fell in unnatural patterns, spiraling down like white ash. The people stayed indoors, murmuring prayers not to the seven but to the trees. The heart tree's face seemed to shift when no one watched it directly, its mouth deeper, its eyes wider, its bark darker. Jon stood on the battlements with Sam. "He's coming," Jon said. Voice low. Sam nodded, shivering. "He's not like the others. He's not just chasing crowns. He's chasing gods." Jon's knuckles turned white around Longclaw's hilt. "Then we give him one." Far beneath the wall, the black veins in the ice began to pulse. Again, slow, subtle, as if stirred by something not strong, enough to break through yet, but waking all the same. And here's the twist. The seal wasn't invincible. It could be tricked. When Arya offered herself, she gave blood and name and memory, but memory could be copied. And Euron Greyjoy held something that did just that. The blade he carried had been forged in the ruins of Valyria, in a pool where shadowbinders once sacrificed kings and carved their souls into steel. It wasn't a weapon. It was a key, and it wanted to be used. On the third night, the sky cracked open with lightning so loud it shook the stones of Winterfell. Jon, Tyrion, and Brienne stood in the courtyard as a raven fell from the sky, burned to ash mid-flight. Davos emerged from the Godswood, face pale. "It's not the wall anymore," he said. "It's what's beneath it." Bran, now changed beyond recognition, wheeled into the room, eyes unfocused, voice far too calm. "Euron means to open the seal. From the sea." Everyone stared. Tyrion stepped forward. "The wall ends at Eastwatch, but the sea touches it." Bran nodded. The ice doesn't stop in the air. It sinks deep into the water. He wants to wake the god through salt. That sentence alone changed the war, because now the North wasn't just preparing for battle. They were preparing for something worse, a second birth. The Night King had been cold, merciless, predictable, but whatever was beneath the seal. That was chaos, emotionless, formless, a will with no face, and it was listening to Euron. At Eastwatch by the Sea, the Iron Fleet landed under moonlight. No horns, no drums, just footsteps in the surf. And blood, they marched inland, dragging prisoners, northerners, wildlings, even deserters from the watch. Euron tied them to stones, held the black blade above their heads, and began the ritual. The sea turned black, salt froze on the sand, and the wall screamed. Jon felt it from Winterfell. Every weirwood groaned. Every raven turned its head toward the east. Sansa rushed into the hall. "What was that?" Bran was already seizing. He whispered, "He's..." echoing Arya's sacrifice. "Using stolen blood. I tried to warn you. The seal doesn't care who dies. It cares how, and it was working." The wall began to crack, but not at the top. At the bottom, the veins reactivated. Not white. Not blue, but red, pulsing with heat, fire, chaos. Jon mounted his horse before dawn. He rode east alone. No army, no banners, just Ghost at his side and one vow in his heart. "I failed Arya once. I won't again, wait." Did he just ride alone to face Euron Greyjoy? Bro, this man really is the shield that guards the realms of men. As Jon galloped through the storm, he saw things no one else could. The trees leaned toward him. The ground whispered. And somewhere, just barely, he heard Arya's voice. "Finish it." Back at Eastwatch, Euron plunged the blade into the sea, screaming words not meant for mouths. The salt boiled. The water frothed. The ice cracked and something reached up. A hand, not flesh, not bone, shadow, pure will. Euron smiled. "I've opened the gate." Then Jon arrived and everything changed. He rode through the tide, leaping from his horse, Longclaw flashing. His blade met the ritual circle just as the seal tried to complete. The shadow screamed. Euron roared, raising his cursed weapon to strike. Jon met him. Blade against blade. The clash shattered the sand, blood hit the waves. Ghost lunged at Euron's men. Sam arrived moments later, dragging fireglass and scrolls written in dead tongues. Behind him, the last of the watch. The final stand had begun. Jon and Euron fought under the bleeding sky, surrounded by a sea turning to steam. The seal pulsed beneath them, trying to decide. Arya's blood still lingered in the ice. But now Euron's blade challenged it. Only one name could remain. In the moment that mattered, Jon did not strike to kill. He dropped his sword and raised his palm. "Take me," he said, "but seal it forever." The shadow paused. The wall groaned. Then Arya's voice echoed through the wind. "He is mine." The seal chose. The shadow retreated. Euron screamed, his blade melting in his hand, turning to liquid shadow that ate through his wrist. The tide receded. The wall turned black, not with rot, but finality. It would never open again. Jon collapsed. Sam ran to him. "Jon, Jon!" He opened his eyes. "I saw her," Jon whispered. She smiled, and then he slept, not died, slept, because death in the North is never final. Is never final. Winter was over, but no one celebrated. Not in the North, not in the South, not even in the still-burning halls of King's Landing. The sky had cleared, the seal beneath the wall had gone silent, and the ground had stopped whispering. But Westeros had learned something no crown, no war, no king ever taught it before. That silence doesn't mean safety, it means someone paid the price. Jon Snow remained unconscious for 9 days. He was neither dead nor truly alive. The maesters didn't know what to call it. His body healed, slowly. But his spirit wandered. Bran said he could still feel Jon, like a flicker in the roots of the weirwood trees. "He's in the memory," Bran whispered. "Just like Arya, just like Ned. He's part of the wall now." Ghost never left his side. Sansa sat beside him every night, reading letters he'd never answer. Her voice grew quieter each time. Brienne stood guard outside, sword drawn day and night, and still the realm waited. Daenerys returned to Winterfell. She didn't bring an army. She brought Drogon, who landed outside the gates and curled around the castle like a sleeping god. No one dared approach him. Inside the halls she met with Sansa. "I didn't come for war," Dany said. Sansa folded her hands. Then why are you here? I came to ask what comes next, and that was the question no one could answer. Because how do you rebuild a realm that's been held together by ice and shadow and blood? How do you tell people the gods they worshipped were real and watched? Sam stood before the lords and ladies of Westeros in a great council. The same chambers that once held executions and betrayals now held silence and reverence. He spoke softly. The wall has sealed again, but it is not just a wall. It is a memory. And we are bound to it. Tyrion leaned forward. And what do we do with memory? Respect it, Sam said. And learn from it, Gendry rose. Jon Snow gave everything. So did Arya. So did Ned Stark. Are we just going to let the realm fall back into the same hands that built the wars they died to end? Tormund growled. Then let the North rule itself. The room erupted, but Bran didn't speak, until everyone else had. Then, with that distant voice that now sounded less like a boy and more like a tree, he said, "There will be no Iron Throne. There will be no King of the Seven Kingdoms. There will be no empire. The hall stilled. There will be protectors, guardians, warden seers, one for each region, one voice for each land. And no crown above them." Daenerys blinked. "You mean rule by council?" "No," Bran said. "Rule by memory. Those who forget will fall again. We will remember. And the trees will judge us all." Wait, did Bran just reinvent the whole power structure of Westeros? This isn't monarchy. This isn't democracy. This is ancient law rooted in blood gods and the past. You didn't see that coming. The proposal was voted and it passed, not with cheers, but with silent nods. The world had changed. And the people who mattered understood it. The North remained independent. Sansa was declared the voice of the North, not queen, not lady voice. She spoke for the trees, for the sacrifices, for the seal. And she wore no crown. Bran remained in the weirwood chamber. His body faded slowly, but his mind never left. Some said he became more raven than man. Others said he flew beyond the wall in dreams and never came back. Tyrion became the warden of knowledge. He didn't rule. He taught, he wrote. The book he published was titled The Long Silence. The last chapter simply read, "She was no one." And she saved everyone. Daenerys stayed, not to rule, but to watch. To stand guard over the wall with Drogon circling the skies like a sentinel of fire, daring any god or man to rise again, and Jon. On the 10th day he opened his eyes. Ghost stirred. The fire beside him roared, then dimmed. Sam ran into the room. "Jon?" Jon turned his head slowly. "I saw her," he whispered. "I saw Arya." Sam smiled through tears. "You did it." "You stopped it." Jon shook his head. "No, she did." He rose from the bed slowly, painfully. His strength wasn't in his muscles anymore. It was in his presence. Like something in him had been rewritten. He walked outside, people gathered. Not in fear, not in awe, just silence. Jon looked at them all and said, "There are no kings left, only watchers." And from that day on, that's what they called him, the Last Watcher. He never returned to the south. He lived near the wall, patrolling its base, visiting the weirwood groves, ensuring the seal never weakened again. No banners, no sword. Just a man and his wolf, guarding the past so the future wouldn't forget. Arya's name was never spoken in vain. Her blade remained embedded in the frost, glowing faintly. It never rusted. It never dulled. And every child born in the north grew up hearing the same story. Once the gods slept. Then a Stark woke them. Then another Stark bled them. And one gave up the world to put them back to sleep. No one knows what lies beneath the wall now. No one dares find out, because some locks should never be tested, some memories should never be disturbed, and some names are carved in ice forever.